Sambucus nigra. Nickname for this plant is plates. This is part 1, and in part 2 I'll be sharing a mnemonic or memory technique to help you commit to memory the most distinguishing characteristics of this plant for identifying purposes. Be sure to watch all of part 1 so that part 2 is understandable. This is a large shrub or small tree. It's bushy, it's spreading. You'll find it 4 to 15 feet tall usually. Very rarely will you find it taller than 30 feet. And as you can see, it features large white flower clusters, which is where the plant derives its nickname from. As you can see, it kind of resembles plates. We'll see closer pictures of these flower clusters later. Plates. A shrub or tree is distinguished from herbaceous plants by its bark. And yes, the plates plant does have bark. It is what also distinguishes it from its poisonous look-alike, water hemlock. White flowers develops in large white clusters. These clusters can be from 4 inches to 10 inches across. They are referred to as umbels because they develop from rays from the base, like an umbrella. Umbels. The leaflets are lance-shaped, or they can be elliptical shaped more like a football. That's important to mention because in the mnemonic coming up in part 2, I associate a football with the shape of the leaves. They're obviously green. There are 3 to 5 small seeds inside each of the fruit. This picture shows us a number of things. First, I'd like to mention that we are looking at the leaf here. This entire part is referred to as a leaf. Okay? Which features individual leaflets. The leaves of the plates plant always feature odd pinnately compound leaves. Odd meaning that the leaflets are odd in number. In this case, we see 7. You can immediately tell whether a plant is odd or evenly pinnate compound by the number of leaflets on the tip. In this case, we have 1, which is an odd number. 1 leaflet on the tip, which makes it instantly an odd pinnately compound leaf, regardless of however many leaflets we have below that. If you see 2 leaflets on the tip, then of course that would be an evenly pinnately compound leaf. Pinnate in botany basically means feather-like. If you see here, this leaf is kind of like a feather, shaped like a feather. Okay? Now, the other thing we see in this picture as it relates to the leaves and the leaflets, each leaflet has veins which fade out after it leaves the midrib. It's important to remember this because it is one of the key features which distinguishes it from its poisonous look-alike, which is the water hemlock. The water hemlock veins clearly reach to the edge of the leaflet after it leaves the midrib. But again, this illustration shows us, especially here in this area, how the veins generally fade out. In the event that they do reach the edge of the leaflet, it will not be clear at all, and if you have a number 10 glass or magnifying glass, you will see how the veins reach the edge of the leaflet at the tip of a tooth, not between the notches of the teeth. I'll show you a better picture of those distinctions later. Here we see that the individual flowers have 5 petals. The flowers are star-shaped. There are also 5 stamens. Okay. These here represent the flowers which are on their way to fruiting. They are yellowish to green, more green when it's developed into a raw fruit. And this is one of the colors that the fruit can develop into. I'll be detailing some more of the colors the fruit can bear in a later slide. The teeth are very finely serrated, which is again different than the water hemlock, the poisonous water hemlock, which have teeth which are much larger and more spaced out. This is called what? This is called a leaf. I'm mentioning this again because when distinguishing plants or when identifying plants, there are characteristics which include whether or not the leaves alternate or whether or not they are opposite along a stem. And I don't want you to be confused in thinking that these leaflets represent leaves, because they do not. The water hemlock has opposite leaflets, as the plates plant has opposite leaflets. Okay? However, the difference is that the leaves, remember, this is an odd pennant, feather-like, compound, many parts, odd pennant compound leaf. The leaves of the plates plant are opposite of one another on the stem. Now the poisonous water hemlock leaves alternate along the stem. Okay? Now, on the fact sheet and on the poisonous lookalikes chart, you'll find 4 ways to distinguish the two. But in my opinion, in any one of the 4 distinctions will work. 4 is better than 1. Moving on. Finely serrated teeth, elliptical, leaflet shape. The leaflets can be 2 to 5 inches long and 1 to 2 inches wide. They all feature prominent points at the tip. More of an elliptical shape here. shaped like a football. Reference to football is mentioned in part 2 for the mnemonic. This is a water hemlock leaflet. We can see 3 distinctions here. The 4th distinction that I mentioned has to do with the bark. The water hemlock is an herbaceous plant. It has no bark. The plates plant does. The other 3 distinctions, all seen in the leaf, is 1. The veins clearly reach the edge of the leaflet. The plates plants plates plant veins do not. The veins of this poisonous water hemlock leaflet clearly reach the edge. They also end between the teeth, whereas a plates plant, the veins end, if you can barely see some of the few which might reach the edge of the leaflet, they will end at the tip of a tooth. Then the 3rd distinguishing characteristic of these 2 plants are the teeth. Notice how much larger the teeth are. Let me turn this power on. It might cause a little static. Alright, get back to work here. Alright. Much larger space between the teeth. The teeth are also much larger. Now in the mnemonic, which surrounds a complete place setting, we have already seen the plates. You'll also be dealing with the cup, the knife, the fork, and the spoon. And the knife is specified as a steak knife because I want you to imagine a steak knife is having much smaller teeth than this here. Apologize for any static if it's present. Now, this is a picture of the plates leaflets, of course. See the difference. They look nothing alike. Plates, a white plate, flat-topped clusters, very characteristic of this plant. When you see this, automatically the mnemonic should help you to think about a plate, and I'll just leave it at that. You have to check out part 2 to get to the springboard, which will spring you into all the other techniques to remember this plant. Again, 5 petals, 5 stamen. The individual flowers are very tiny. They're about 5 to 6 millimeters across. They have a very sweet smell. They're grown in dense clusters. As you can see, the 5 stamen have yellow anthers. These flowers have started to develop into fruit, as you can see here. They are raw. They are not edible in this stage when they are green. These flower clusters are developed by branching rays, referred to as umbels. Resembles an umbrella, where the branching rays come from the base and they branch off again. They branch out from the base, then they branch again, referred to as a compound umbel. Here we see the fruit, which develops in drooping clusters. You'll find some raw fruit and ripe fruit on the same cluster, so you have to be careful when picking them. Now the fruit ranges in taste and in color. The color ranges from a blue-black to purple-black. They can be a solid black or even an amber red. As long as they're soft and juicy, they're edible. However, the seeds of the red berries are not edible. The seeds of any other color berries, the blue or the blue-black, the purple-black, or the black, those are edible. You can chew them up, no problem. But the red berries, spit them out, or quite a few in my research suggest swallowing the seeds whole of the red berries, whether passed safely through your system, or just spit them out. The Native Americans had a way of purging the seeds from the berries beforehand, but a lot of those details will be available on the fact sheet of this plant at survivalplantsmemorycourse.com. Sambucus nigra, black elderberry, or plates. Another picture of the drooping berry cluster. And these berries, as I make a note in the mnemonic explanation, do not have the cherry-like seam down the side. Of the 52 plants that are shared that will be covered in this course, there are only 2 which develop berry-like fruit. And this one is distinguished primarily because it does not have the cherry-like seam and would not remind you of cherries, whereas the other one, choke cherry, will more instantly remind you of a cherry. And cherry is very well closely associated with the choke cherry's nickname. Check that out. Green berries, not edible. Now, as the plant grows older, the bark develops vertical lenticels. These lenticels are basically allows air and gas to exchange in and out of the plant. When young, these round cork-like structures or impressions or characteristics are much smaller. We'll see a picture of that later. But this, I would say, would be like an adolescent tree. I showed you this picture because, again, it shows the vertical lenticels. These small round dots, cork-like dots, start to, expand into a vertical form, And this is where the fork in the mnemonic comes in. The fork looks like a fork had scratched that bark. When the tree becomes much older, if it is a small tree rather than a shrub, the bark develops much deeper furrows or ridges. Can also be seen or imagined that this was done with a fork when you're in the field using the mnemonic. The twigs have very small, reddish to brown buds, which are pointy. The buds are opposite of one another. This is from where the leaves develop. Again, tiny buds, pointy. This shows us a picture of the cork-like lenticels. When young, these twigs are green to and they're smooth. They are light brown. More lenticels. Tiny reddish buds. Can be the bark, that is, light brown to light gray. This one's light brown. And the terminal buds, or the buds on the tip, are very lacking, almost non-existent. The edible parts of this plant are the berry-like fruit and the juicy flowers. A side note, this plant is a member of the honeysuckle family. That is what makes the flowers very juicy. To learn how to prepare these parts, visit survivalplantsmemorycourse.com. Click on Sambucus nigra, black elderberry, or plates, all on the same link, and go to the fact sheet and you'll find the methods of preparation there. Thank you for watching part 1. In part 2, I'll be sharing a mnemonic or memory technique to help you commit to memory the most distinguishing characteristics of this plant for identifying purposes.